Navio, docked to Macha's Lagrange 5 anchorage. "I bet they're happily enjoying all sorts of exquisite foods and drinks down there," Leopold said, idly scratching his scar as he stared at Macha off in the distance from the observation deck of the monumental anchorage station. Beside him, his teammates and several other personnel ate standard rations, gambled, drank, or chatted. "Do you not pay any attention whatsoever to what I say?" Gregor asked, before taking a sip from a flask he was holding. "Only when you say something half worthwhile, Blue Blood," Leopold replied with a small smirk. Gregor took another sip and Raquel took over. "Leopold, what makes you think they are preoccupied with eating good food and drinks?" "The party," Leopold replied. "Did you see Wyatt? Man, I couldn't have held to that thing if I'd tried with so many blue bloods around me." No offense, Raquel," he was quick to add. "After the procession, they're going to a party, right? Lucky Wyatt. And here we are, stuck on this station while he gets to eat, drink, and hang around beautiful ladies. Worst shore leave ever," the pilot complained. Raquel's mouth opened, and she turned to Gregor with an expression that read, "Is he serious?" The shorter man nodded in response while Nultar watched with a wide, impish smile. "You are so clueless despite your abilities," she lamented, closing her eyes in disappointment. Leopold pointed a finger at himself. "Commoner, remember? So what? They're not down there preening their feathers and stuffing their faces like most nobles do?" Raquel reopened her eyes and asked, "Where were you born, Leopold?" "Rastuji, all the way from Ishtal territory," he said with no small amount of pride. "Too bad they sided with traitors, but hey, that gives me a good reason to kick Blue Blood some ass, eh?" "Rastuji. Ah, no wonder your views on nobility are so terrible. The decadent House Bitofo controls that planet, if I recall correctly." "That's them, all right. I swear they spend half the year throwing parties and eating everything that moves. I know other nobles aren't like those bastards, but come on," Leopold replied, ending with a chuckle. "And I've already told you that House Bitofo reviled even among other houses. It is their position and control of resources that has kept them in their position. Not to mention their loyalty to House Ishtal as one of their banners, Leopold," Gregor added. "Contrary to your experiences, noble parties are anything but. A party that's not a party where you get to dance, sing, and drink until you forget how to walk?" "Pfft, yeah, I believe you," Leopold replied in a joking tone. But at the silence of his three comrades, his expression turned more serious. "Wait, that's a real thing? How?" "Because, Leo, noble parties, get-togethers, and other such wonderful opportunities to mingle are excuses to do what most nobles love doing more than anything, playing their silly little games of power, influence, and skullduggery," Nultar said, experience dripping from each word he spoke. "Oh, sure, there's fine food, drink, and entertainment, but the real prize is to make connections, find out weaknesses from rivals, plant false evidence on your enemies, spread lies and rumors, meet new blood, see what chances are present to form new alliances or strengthen already existing ones, or just kiss a truly monumental amount of ass." "Could you please not be so crude in front of a lady?" Gregor asked, eyes narrowing. "I don't need you to speak on my behalf, Gregor. If such talk irritates me, I will make my discomfort known swiftly through my own voice or my fist," Raquel said, earning a roll of the eyes from Gregor before he sipped from his flask again. "Nultar is correct, Leopold. That's what Lieutenant Wyatt is doing right now along with Commander Redford, Her Majesty, Princess Clara, and Lady Cynthia. They're not there to have a good time, Leopold. They are on a battlefield that I wish never to partake in again." Leopold winced. "Forget anything I said, then. I'd rather stay here. Speaking of which, why are we here? The rest of the damn fleet is spread across 3 other anchorages, but not a single other ship is here." "It is not for us to know. Princess Clara ordered we would dock here, and here we are," Nultar said with a shrug. "Besides, it isn't too bad. Everyone got paid plus a small bonus. Even the recruits from Woodshaft got an initial payment. So all of us get to enjoy ourselves for however long the princess plans to stay. Speaking of that, what are you drinking, Gregor?" Gregor swallowed his latest sip and raised an eyebrow. "Wine," he replied nonchalantly. "I thought you hated alcoholic beverages," Leopold asked, confused. "I'm the one that loves getting shit-faced around here." "My implants can handle it. It has a low volume," Gregor answered, taking another sip. "It helps me focus and think clearly." "Think about what?" Leopold asked. Wyatt's words, actions, and how is it possible for a commoner to be such a masterful deceiver and planner? Gregor replied, closing his flask. Did you hit your head or something, Gregor? Leopold asked, concerned. Raquel crossed her arms and hummed deeply. So you've noticed it too, Undaj? What about you, Okara? I have my doubts, but I can't see any other reason, Noltar replied. Leopold stared at the three of them for several seconds, mouth agape and completely bewildered. What, in the prince's name, are you three talking about? You can't be that stupid, Leopold, Gregor began. The prince relied on him to root out the conspirators within his circle. He relied on him. A royal put his trust in a mere commoner, a laughable proposition. Not only that, but he has gained the trust of Princess Clara. Lady Cynthia, a bloody Winfield, is personally training him. Why? How? And Commander Redford gave him the right to choose his teammates for his named fighter squadron, Nultar continued. A commoner is a commoner, after all. Wyatt Staples can't possibly be just a commoner. He has placed himself squarely within Princess Clara's entourage, perhaps even within her inner circle. The thought alone makes me uneasy, Raquel added, eyes narrowing. And his words during our second day of training, they sounded so sincere. I believed him. But it can't be true. It just can't. Leopold stared at his companions one at a time, waiting, praying, hoping to see them crack a smile, a smirk, anything. But as seconds passed, a choked, rasping groan of disbelief escaped his throat. Guys, Wyatt isn't some sort of mastermind, didn't you hear him? He fucked up, simple as. He was going through a damn panic attack. I know I talk a lot of shit about nobles and your privileged positions, but I don't know if I could have handled being elevated the way he was. You're simply naive, Leo, Gregor continued, lamenting the ignorance of his friend and teammate. The disastrous day prior and his apology were but a test. A ruse, if you will. He was testing us and our resolve. We passed. Barely, I fear. He's been testing our weaknesses and strengths, measuring us, to see if we are worth our standing. He has given us ample room to voice our opinions and doesn't belittle our failings. He's unlike other team leaders and officers I've served under. It is disconcerting how different he is, Raquel seconded, as Nultar nodded in agreement. Paradoxical, approachable, talented, and has the aptitudes of a great squadron leader, perhaps more. Yet he is humble and shows no interest in furthering his position and influence. Then again, he has the attention of the prince himself and the ear of Princess Clara. How much higher can you truly go than that? You three, Leopold said, barking a laugh, have gone insane. Wyatt was a gosh darn compost hauler. He named his squadron composters for crying out loud. Yeah, he saved Princess Clara and he's done some pretty insane stuff, but that doesn't mean he's been planning all of this from the start. Do you honestly think that Wyatt Staples, the man that barked at the command of 3 blue bloods? Yeah, I was there when it happened. Would be this crazy mastermind all of a sudden? Then how do you explain everything he's done? Very few nobles would even consider admitting to having failed in their tasks, let alone apologize to their subordinates the way he's done. It's as if he has no concept of pride and honor, Raquel questioned. That's because he wasn't a noble until recently, morons, Leopold cried out. You're seeing censor ghosts where there are none. Wyatt is earnest and honest. Too honest, in fact. And he ain't a backstabbing prick like most nobles are. He ain't waiting to use us for his benefit or test us for some confounded reason. He's just trying to do his best in a position he never wanted in the first place. At least I know I wouldn't want to be a bloody noble. No offense. Whatever the case may be, Nultar said in an uncharacteristic serious tone, you cannot deny that every circumstance surrounding him is beyond the norm. Is he really who he claims to be, or have we just seen the man he wants us to see? You are all crazy, Leopold said, exasperated. You'll see I'm right. Wyatt may be a noble now, but he is a commoner at heart. He may change in time, but he's not a shadowy mastermind, he said, and turned his attention back to Matcha. I really wanted to go and meet up a few girls, though. On that, Leo, we can agree, Nultar said. His usual jovial tone returned. Raquel glared at the two while Gregor took another sip from his flask, his eyes narrowing as he, too, stared at the distant planet. Matcha, capital world of House Finnegan, Grand Palace. After the ceremony ended with the closing words of the prince proclaiming that Duke Draymore would be defeated and that the fight had just begun, the already large room began to move and shift. The walls opened up, pillars rose from the ground, and a horde of servants came through to place tables, chairs, cloths, and a plethora of utensils all over the expanding room, now easily 3 times as spacious. The prince rose once the servants were done, placing countless trays filled with foods he'd never seen before, exquisite dishes, extravagant drinks, and lavishly decorated plates, silverware, and glasses. He thanked Marchioness Amelia Finnegan, vowing to reward her loyalty once the conflict was over, and then the party began. As a commoner who had been neither rich nor poor, he'd been to a few parties before that fateful encounter with the Drazen. Those had always been quaint little affairs. A few friends gathered here, some family members there, good friends and neighbors coming together, pulling their resources together to have an enjoyable evening or night. His favorite party was when he turned 13, 1 year before he enlisted in the Royal Navy Academy. His mother, bless her heart, had knitted him a scarf. Weskel kept half the carcass of a clixel that the guild misplaced for a feast that day. Wham giving him a new carving knife he made himself, his always supportive father hugging him tightly. The laughter they enjoyed that day, discovering he had the dancing skills of a gala, Mr. Warlow coming over to give them some of his stew and give him a fresh batch of painting pencils and paint. Their always cheerful neighbor, Wuzka, joining in with some toasted beans and lachoa, and the Lumen family sharing their homemade cider. That had been a good day. The memory brought a smile to his face, especially when he compared it to the party unfolding before him. There was music played by very talented musicians, slow, mellow melodies that were always in the background and never loud enough to obscure anything but the quietest of whispers. Groups of nobles had formed everywhere around tables or standing in circles. Some even walked in pairs of small groups, mingling between themselves. The smell of the food was mixed with the pungent fragrance of perfumes and luxury oils he never knew existed. There were laughs and chuckles, giggles and dignified snorts, and it all felt so fake and boring that Wyatt had to try with every fiber of his body to not yawn. And here I thought I knew what boredom was like, hauling compost from station to station, planet to planet, and system to system. This could be classified as torture. No, it is torture. I'd rather receive an extra session of Cynthia's training over dealing with this. Am I going insane? Wyatt thought as he stood next to Clara's left side while Cynthia stood on her right. The princess was sitting on the table that the prince, the Marchioness, and her 2 oldest sons had been occupying not too long ago. They had moved to mingle with the gathered noble groups, leaving Clara with 3 other members of House Finnegan to deal with. 2 of the Marchioness's daughters and her oldest unmarried nephew. They were talking about economics, mercantile deals, the strain the Duke's treachery put on several systems, possible alliances, and other topics that he simply couldn't wrap his head around. At least, not fully. And through it all, he noticed, Clara's expression remained unchanged. Ever polite and approachable, but cold as ice. "Is that why I've yet to see Frederick Anderson, the scandal? A treacherous weasel he be?" asked Anna, if he remembered correctly. "Quite so. He was a traitor. Rest assured he is in captivity and his secrets are being extracted. He is stubborn, but we already knew that," Clara replied, with complete naturality. "She's such a great liar. If I didn't know that the traitor was dead and gone, I would believe her," Wyatt thought, and paid more attention to the conversation, eager to finally be able to stave off his boredom. Unlike House Anderson, the wretches, House Finnegan knows what loyalty is, and we stand with our beloved Majesty, the Prince, your Highness, said Hekatok with zeal and bravado. Duke Cornelius Draymore has forgotten his place and will be deposed. Victory will never be his. It nearly was. Blue blood, Wyatt thought grimly. Clara nodded. Indeed he will. Then she sighed tiredly. Just thinking about all the reforms, purges, elevations, degradations, investigations, and trials that will follow my uncle's defeat is tiring. Rest assured, those loyal will be recognized. Wyatt sincerely hoped that was the case, that Duke Draymore would be defeated. As the 2 Finnegan women brought up fans to cover their faces, as they giggled in approval and Hekatok proclaimed his undying loyalty for the umpteenth time, The pilot couldn't help but notice a few oddities around him. Firstly, behind the Finnegan women stood 4 maids, all beautiful with cybernetic eyes. Were the Finnegans so powerful that they could afford to have other nobles as servants? Even so, these maids wore fine-looking dresses, and not only them, almost every lady present wore dresses that were so extravagant that it hurt to look at them. If there was a word that could describe it, that would be gaudy. The lords were no better. While not as extravagant, their formal attires were borderline distasteful with how many adornments they had on them. Some even wore the most colorful outfits he'd ever seen, coming in bright yellows, oranges, and blues. What made it worse was that he was certain those clothes had to be expensive. Clothing choices aside, his greatest concern was the ladies. Not a single lady present wasn't shadowed by at least 2 maids. Even Amelia Finnegan was followed closely by 3 of them. All of them had maids. So where are Clara's maids? As a princess, she should have plenty of maids at her service. They should be here like they've always... Wait, I've never seen any of them since I met her now that I think about it. She's only ever accompanied by Cynthia. There were at least over 200 survivors from the royal yacht, yet none of them were Clara's maids or servants. Did they die? Were they captured or left behind? Wyatt pondered as the realization manifested in his mind. Now that he was fully awake, the other oddities became bigger problems. The prince was constantly assaulted by other nobles wishing to either extend a cordial greeting or establish a brief conversation with him or those closest to him, like Juliana and Redford. The same happened with Amelia Finnegan and a bunch of other nobles of renown present, such as George Lintar, Lukacs Ishtal, William Hemstroke, Vivian Taravis, and Hannah Talaro, plus many more he had never met before. But Clara was being actively avoided. Looking closer at the 3 Finnegan present, he was now able to see their unease. The fidgeting, the nervousness in their movements, the repeated proclamations of loyalty to the prince and House Astor. It was clear that they didn't want to be there, but were either forced or ordered to remain at her side. Most of all, he noticed the fear in their eyes. Fear directed at Clara. Wyatt, the lady in the red dress is going to pretend to fall as she walks past you. Do not move to aid her. The voice of Clara was clear in his mind, breaking him out of his stupor just in time to see the aforementioned lady, and his heart skipped a beat. To call what she was wearing scandalous would be an understatement. The red, vibrant dress she was wearing was skin-tight, denoting her curvaceous figure, a rather generous cleavage of her bosom, and an equally vibrant red hair that shone against the light illuminating the room. She was breathtakingly beautiful, he had to admit. But just as Clara had warned, the moment she passed next to him, she suddenly lost her step and let out a soft gasp as she fell forward. Wyatt's first instinct was to rush and prevent the red-haired woman from falling face first onto the ground, but obeying Clara's command, he forced himself to remain still as a statue, only his eyes following her as she fell. Before her balance was completely lost, she miraculously regained her footing and unfurled a fan, covering half her face behind it. My, how silly of me. It seems I must have tasted too much wine. Apologies, my princess. I did not wish to inconvenience you, the red-haired quickly apologized. Pay it no heed. Mind your drinks, though. A lady must not embarrass herself, Clara replied, her mask unwavering. Of course, of course. Excuse me, my princess, for I believe my brother is calling, she said, excusing herself as she quietly left, followed by 3 maids and swaying her hips a bit more than what was necessary. What in the world was that all about? Wyatt thought to himself, but quickly remembered the warning Clara and Cynthia had given him. As he focused on the red-haired woman, she made a turn a few tables over and moved her fan away, partially revealing her face, which was, unsurprisingly, showing the frustration someone showed when a plan was foiled. As delightful as your company is, Clara said, and his attention was back on her. I'm afraid I wish to take a stroll through the gardens. I shall come back before the feast begins. Do not worry, I have informed my brother already. Feast? All of the food here, and this isn't the feast yet? Wyatt thought as a void appeared in his stomach at the idea of so much being wasted. The food and drinks had barely been touched, and yet there was to be more. What sort of twisted joke of a nightmare was he going through? In a not-so-subtle hurry, the 3 Finnegans left the table, excusing themselves while Clara held out her hands. At the same time, he and Cynthia gently held her hand and helped her up to her feet. Wyatt moved the chair back, giving her ample room to walk, and silently followed her alongside Cynthia. As they walked, he noticed the frightened glances, the hostile yet chastened glares, and the way nobles subtly moved out of her way, afraid to come anywhere near her. As they exited the grand hall, the trip made their way to the garden outside where several other nobles were also making use of. The moment they saw them, however, they moved away, or hurriedly rushed back to the grand hall, muttering a weak Your Highness if they passed too close to them. Cynthia, stoic and unflinching as ever, never reacted while Clara replied with nods and polite waves of her hand to anyone brave enough to utter a word. It didn't take long for them to find a quiet place far removed from the music and nosy nobles. Sitting at the edge of a fountain, Clara let out a deep sigh and her mask finally fell off, revealing a tiredness that had been concealed for far too long. "Insulting, honorless, misbegotten snakes," Cynthia finally made her voice known, deep and grumbling, "acting as if we could not see them. My princess, you do not deserve such treatment." "We both know they would never see me any other way, Cynthia, but your words are appreciated, my dearest friend," Clara replied before straining her neck to the side until a gentle pop was heard. "Politics. So tiresome." "That's what that party is all about?" Wyatt asked, softly. "I would hardly call that a party. Perhaps a banquet or a lavish social gathering could be a more apt descriptor," Clara replied, her voice sweeter but still retaining an edge to it. "Behold, Sir Wyatt Staples, our allies, a wide collection of volatile, opportunistic men and women who would happily backstab each other for more influence and power. Such is the battlefield in which alliances are forged, bargains are made, deals are struck, and enemies are undone." "But aren't they loyal to House Astor and the Prince? The Marchioness?" Wyatt began, but Clara cut him off. "Amelia Finnegan is many things, but purely loyal is not one of them. She's a chess master, a manipulator, a deal maker, an opportunistic woman who plays her cards one at a time and keeps the rest as a closely guarded secret. She can be trusted to act within her own interests and that of her house, but within reason and always in service of House Astor and the Principality. She's ambitious and thirsts for power, but not without reason or outside her capabilities. That makes her predictable in the short term, which in turn gives her reliable strength, a strong bargaining position, and immediate diplomatic power. Many strong minor houses outside their banner houses have already flocked behind House Finnegan, hoping some of that power trickles down to them, and it will, as long as they play their part," Cynthia added. "More will follow and the influence will spread now that the prince has come to the light. She's a cunning woman, if nothing else." Wyatt winced at their tired tones. "It seems I have much to learn about being a noble." "Indeed," Clara agreed. "You must know who can mingle with and who you can't, who may be important and who you can ignore, who you must respect and whom you must treat with derision. Are you looking to establish an alliance, or are you simply prospecting for deals to be made? Will you be betrayed? Will you be the betrayer?" She sighed tiredly once more. "It is even more difficult when you are not desired to be present in the first place. On that note, congratulations, Wyatt. You followed my orders to the letter. Many harpies and wanton wenches tried to approach you, but only one had the nerve to come close. Her attempt was even commendable and practical. She'll be dangerous to anyone dumb enough to fall for her," Cynthia announced, ending with a dark chuckle. "Did you see them, Wyatt? Did you see the eyes set upon you like predators measuring the leap needed to catch their prey?" Wyatt shook his head as he shifted on his feet a little, the cool air of the night proving to be refreshing. "I didn't, actually. I was bored out of my mind for the most part. I caught a few glances and glares, but nothing else until the red-haired woman came along. What was that all about?" "A simple yet effective tactic. What sort of gentleman wouldn't try to aid a lady as she falls? Had you moved to aid her, she would have pressed herself onto you and tried to charm you with her beauty. She was indeed fetching." "An easy proposition," Clara replied, moving her left hand back and forth in front of her. "An introduction followed by a pointed remark on your physique, a subtle touch here, a clever, tasteful joke there, and the next thing you know, you are sharing a glass of wine sitting on a trap of her design."